All right, let's get started. This is the session, Honing Your SharePoint User Experience Skills. And my name is Christian Buckley. I am a four-time Microsoft MVP, currently Office 365. I was 3 times rewarded for SharePoint, and I am the Managing Director of Americas at GT Consult, based out of beautiful downtown Bellevue, Washington. And you can, of course, reach me at all the normal places. If I can forward my screen here. There it is. There's me. You can reach me by email and, of course, find my blog and find me on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of the other social tools that are out there. But definitely, if you have questions or feedback and just want to get in touch, feel free to reach out to me. Let's start with a little bit about GT Consult. So we are a full-service consulting company, started in South Africa, 3 offices in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban, and the newest office in Bellevue, Washington. We are very strong in migrations, in governance planning, but also everything from branding and design, so that helping you build out that user experience, and whether it's on-prem or Office 365. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, so we're a managed partner, as well as participants in the Business Critical SharePoint program and a number of other Microsoft programs. So love to tell you more about what we do. Feel free to drop me a note about that. And of course, we're also a partner of Kaligo, and Kaligo are the sponsors of this session. And if you'd like to know more about Kaligo, they are the leading provider of data sync solutions for Microsoft SharePoint, and they basically build out these sync tools as native applications. So, in fact, they were doing things for the iPhone and for Android before anybody else, and they have won many awards, and they have a unified solution used by over 5,000 organizations worldwide to increase productivity, streamline collaboration, improve client compliance, and deliver a consistent, secure experience across the desktop and mobile devices. And I'll be talking a bit more about mobile and mentioned Kaligo a couple times, but if you're not familiar with Kaligo, you definitely want to go take a look. So what I'm going to talk about in this session today, I'm going to talk about the transformation of user expectations around SharePoint. What does that mean? The user experience. What is it? What can we do to impact it? Why do we care? I'm going to talk about the role of end users in your planning as you're starting to deploy, or if you're going in and rebuilding, the strategies for successful SharePoint deployments, and some ideas for working with your end users on your ongoing operational improvements. So it's this crazy idea that the more you involve your end users, the more likely they are going to accept whatever it is that you build. So you definitely want to get them involved. So what is the user experience? I love this picture. Well, actually, the next couple pictures really kind of highlight where the world is today. I mean, the fact that, so I'm a father of 4 kids, and my kids pretty much grew up with computers in front of them. They've always known this. I'm amazed that all 4 of my children can touch type. They just blow me out of the water. I still can't. I've been in IT for 25 years and I still can't. But they're just, they're throughout their lives, they've been in front of these multiple devices, and they're used to consuming data and communicating with each other in a very different way. And the next picture that really helps illustrate that, and I'm sure everybody's seen a version of this, because if you've been to a concert, like my first date with my wife when we were teenagers was a Duran Duran concert. We went and saw them at Cal Expo in Sacramento. Erasure opened for them, if you want that little piece of trivia. That was the, let's see, I am a Duran Duran fan, so it was the Notorious Tour. Anyway. But, you know, back in the day, it was the slow song comes on, the Bic lighters go up. But nowadays, you look across the crowd and everyone's viewing the concert through their devices. It's just an amazing scene. We're so engrossed in that device experience that we forget to actually watch the concert. That's a different conversation. But it speaks to that user experience. We're looking for something that blends the personal and the professional experiences. It's why you have so much of a push towards the bring your own device. It's this idea that we're always working, we're always on the road, we always want to be connected. And so much of that experience that we have in the consumer world, so if you think of like the social side of things, you ask people what kind of social experience they're looking for within their enterprise applications, the number one answer is, oh, it needs to be kind of like Facebook. Well, we expect certain experiences in our enterprise applications. We want it to be flexible. We want to be able to communicate. We want to be able to see and connect with people in real time, message them as they're offline, automatically sync, co-edit, kind of all of these things that need to be part of that experience. It has dramatically changed our expectations around what SharePoint is like and what it should be like. So there's that question that we hear again and again is, why aren't my end users using SharePoint? And there's another number of reasons why. Well, actually, you know what? There's really the main reason why is because their SharePoint environment looks something like this. You remember the old UI? Wait, this one's a little bit fancier. There we go. Where we've basically translated what was the old binder model, where a new employee comes in, you'd hand them the 3-ring binder with everything that they need to know about every critical business process, all the forms and templates that they need to follow, all the policies and procedures. You'd hand them that binder. Back in the early 90s, I went to work for this little company called Pacific Bell, and that's literally what happened. They handed the binder, which after the first week of working there, it was on my shelf for the rest of my time there, the 3 more years. So if you think about the SharePoint experience, and are you basically giving your end users that out-of-the-box experience or trying to shove every piece of data into their screen? Is that the experience that you're trying to give them? Or are you being a bit more thoughtful about, what are my end users trying to accomplish? What are they looking for from the environment? How can I keep them productive? How can I enable them to do more work better, faster, and keep them more connected with the team? So there's some great feedback from some leaders out in the community. And so this one from Barry Jinks, the CEO of Kaligo. And of course, Barry will love that I use this photo. But one of the challenges for SharePoint is that it's stuck between being a platform and an app. As a platform, it can do a lot of things. As an app, it is limited to the user experience that comes out of the box. And it has that bad reputation. But that's often because the user experience wasn't designed to support specific business processes. And that's a key factor here, is that what end users want is not just the out-of-the-box experience, which is definitely improving, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's that they want it to be aligned with their business activities. You go and you build out SharePoint, not to just have SharePoint in this fantastic team and document management system, but it's deployed to build upon, add to, and enable specific business activities. And so if you design the user experience around those business processes, then you're going to have people stronger adoption, they're going to be more productive on the platform, and they're going to be happier in general with the platform. So another good friend of mine, Eric Overfield with Pixel Mill down in Davis, California, he's co-authored a great branding user experience book. He talks about that inconsistent UI across all the enormous number of features that SharePoint provides. SharePoint bundles so much into one package, but each feature, including the back-ended admin experience, lacks a coherent strategy. And it's true. And while we can argue that things are getting more advanced and it's definitely improving, we're going to talk about some of the new features that have been coming out and how, from a user experience, in some ways, we still lack that coherent strategy. improved in some areas, but in some ways remains the same. Now, I don't know if anybody that's listening in went and participated in the Worldwide Partner Conference last year, Microsoft's partner conference that's every July. And it was the first time where the new CEO, Satya Nadella, got up and he talked about the move away from the old bomber strategy, the corporate strategy around devices and services. And I never fully understood what that meant, and I couldn't get my interactions with Microsoft around the SharePoint, the collaboration stack, to fit within that devices and services strategy. It just didn't make sense. And he clarified, Satya clarified, and he talked about it again. This is a photo out of Ignite in Chicago last month. We talked about Microsoft realigning itself around platforms and productivity. And he got into a lot of detail. You can see the screen behind him where he's building the intelligent cloud and talking a lot about mobility and all those things. But it all comes down to building platforms that teams that our partners can go and provide solutions against, but that customers can go and continue to build to meet their specific end user and customer needs, and building that user experience that's relevant to their business. And then focus on productivity. So Microsoft is trying to build features, trying to build experiences, these end-to-end experiences that might cut across multiple projects or products, I should say, and features. And so they're thinking more about that end-to-end experience, user experience. But where does productivity really begin? It's great that Microsoft is focusing on this, and Satya is very much driving strategy. You see this across the company in engineering and the product and marketing organizations, and even over into sales, of this focus around the platform side, providing the tools, enabling, and then the productivity solutions. But where does it begin? And it really begins with that out-of-the-box experience. This is that SharePoint 2013 out-of-the-box experience. There's a number of things that Microsoft is talking about now for their 2016 release for on-prem, and things that they're already making changes over to Office 365 and SharePoint Online. But it really comes down to, what is that out-of-the-box experience? And my argument is that no matter how good Microsoft makes that out-of-the-box experience, it's never going to be what your end users really want. Certainly not your organization. It's great, it's powerful, it's intuitive as you go. I would argue it's intuitive that you go in, that you're able to, once you get it set up, especially through SharePoint Online and Office 365, once you have it established, it's fairly straightforward. You can go and build a site collection and team sites, document libraries, upload content, share that, co-edit, all of those capabilities. They inherently make sense to people, especially if they've been in the SharePoint space for a while. However, again, it's not what our teams and our end users want. Is this what your end users want, to have that simple out-of-the-box experience? No. The fact is that they want to access key systems from anywhere in the world. So they want to be able to access their tools, their systems. They want to complete forms, initiate workflows, interact with team members, find them online, offline, wherever they are, using any device, and they want to do it all while taking a selfie. So just be aware of that last one. I wish I was kidding. All right, so let's start planning out of the box, planning out the user experience. What are the best practices? And for those that aren't familiar, so I actually wrote a white paper that you can go and download. There's the long address, and I've got it at the end of this as well, and it'll be in the resources here for the event. But some of the best practices is, number one, and there's a lot that's jam-packed into these items. So you definitely want to go take a look at some of the recommendations that come with each one of these best practices. But number one, make the end user experience a priority. And this is like the hardest part of all of these items, because it requires you to go and sit down and have a conversation with people on your team. And people hate that. People hate having to sit down have a conversation and try and really understand what's going on, especially those that are on the engineering side of the house. And I'm not trying to beat up on the technical folks that are listening in, but somebody who is primarily on the business side of things, and does a lot of translation between technical and business users. This is where the rubber meets the road. Sitting down and having a conversation and truly understanding what it is that the business users need before going and trying to build the solution. And then having this conduit of conversation back and forth to make sure that what is being built is actually being delivered. So you need to make that end user experience a priority, that open, transparent communication, and it needs to be constant. And I'm going to come back to that point, and it's kind of throughout this presentation. But that's number one for a reason. Second is thinking about your mobility strategy. And this is key because how people are consuming their data today, it is moving towards those mobile devices. And it may not be, that may be that they still have their laptop, may still have a workstation, but they're accessing this data through multiple devices. So even if their primary at work is a desktop, which is getting to be very rare, it's more often than not a laptop, but there's still going to be multiple devices. So they're going to have a tablet, they're going to have a mobile phone, and most likely one or more of those other devices, mobile devices, will be personal devices. So you need to start thinking about those scenarios. Again, going back to that user experience and thinking, I'm trying to make my people as productive and as happy as possible. What can I do in a secure, compliant way? You need to be thinking about that mobility strategy and what that actually means. You need to have a strategy for monitoring and metrics to know what people are using, to know how they're accessing data. If you're spending all of your dollars in development time and to build out for experiences that can only be accessed within the firewall through those workstations or laptops, like with on company time, but that you see that the majority of SharePoint accesses through these external connections or through these mobile devices. But even within that, to go in and look, and I have had this experience again and again while I was at Microsoft, since leaving Microsoft, working with customers, working with clients, going in and monitoring and measuring how they're actually using the solutions that were delivered, and then going back and refining. This is something that, if you think of how much, if you're not familiar with this, Microsoft, how they're developing software internally has dramatically changed in the 6 years since I left the company, where it was more of a waterfall method of, this annual planning cycle for features and things, which is now this very agile, iterative process. But I think with the acquisition of Yammer helped really change the way that Microsoft, and it's not to say that teams inside of Microsoft weren't already going this direction, but certainly the Yammer acquisition really sped up the move towards the telemetry and analytics around really looking in depth at what specific features are people using, and then going and focusing time and effort and dollars on those things that people are actually using, rather than, hey, we spent all this money and time and resources in building these sites, this custom UI in SharePoint that nobody's using. Learn from that, monitor how people are using it, and focus your efforts where it's going to have the greatest impact. Fourth, continually refine your governance model. Governance, of course, those that read anything by me, I'm constantly harping on governance, but a big part of this is that it's not static. It doesn't just stand still, that governance evolves and changes just as your business requirements and your end user requirements evolve and change. So constantly look at and understand, what are our system constraints? Like, what are our legal requirements? What are our compliance and auditing requirements? And then based on the data that you're seeing out of your monitoring, against the KPIs that you have running against the system, constantly go in and look at and say, well, look, if we have these thresholds that are in place, and yet we're constantly having end users in this other group hitting those thresholds, why are they doing that? How are they using it? Do we need to change our policies? Or is there some other metric? Or do we need to turn off the fact that we're versioning everything and people are versioning to the hilt, and then we're storing all of that content, and it's really building up, or people copying content that, do we need to spend more time around metadata so people aren't copying content and putting duplicate content and putting rules in place around that? Do we need to do more to manage the content? So continually look at what's being impacted by your governance model and refine those models. And then the last thing is to make your change management methodology transparent. And so this is an experience that I've learned this. This goes back, again, my experiences in a shared services IT organization back with Pacific Bell, wow, 15, almost 20 years ago. It was almost 20 years ago. Wow, 20 years ago. But it was putting the change process in front of everybody, so that instead of them, there was this black box operations previously. I built out a project management organization, a PMO for my team there, and made all of our processes very transparent so that people had visibility into the decisions that were being made. Because again, if you give people visibility into the decisions that are being made, they are more likely to support the decisions that are being made. So they'll understand your reasoning for rejecting a feature request, or the delay of something that they feel is urgent because they see, well, of our 4 development resources, these are the priorities of the projects that are in front of theirs. And if they, and I actually had a great, I've got a great story about this. So my last team inside of Microsoft, we had a problem with communications with the teams that we served. So we, even though we had all of our reporting that was pushed out a couple times a week, at least weekly, but a couple times a week, we had our project status meetings, and people just weren't showing up to those. We'd push out email reports, and just people would still complain that they didn't know what we were working on. And I was the shared services team, project management team. And so we put a giant whiteboard on the wall in the walkway right off the elevators, where the majority of people walked by every morning. And we instituted a 15-minute standing meeting with my team, who all groaned. They all hated it. But we stood there and wrote on the whiteboard, what are our priorities for the day? What are the projects that we're working on? What's the ETA, the delivery date, or the time for these things? Who's working on what? And we spelled it all out on the board. We stood there talking about it, and it might be a 2 to 5 minute meeting, very quick if nothing changed. But then we also looked at, over the course of the day, new requests that came in and whether they displaced other projects. And that was the purpose of doing this 5 days a week, and it didn't last forever. But what happened was that people then, as we wrapped up our standing meeting, people would walk over and look at the board. And inevitably, what would happen is people who owned those projects that we were working on for them, they would come over and see, hey, wait a second, I was in number 3 spot yesterday and I had somebody working on it, and now I just got shoved down to the 5th place. What's going on? And so we'd have the conversation. It's like, this is what came in. This is the VP who requested these 2 initiatives. Is your project more essential than number 1? Well, no. Is your project more important than number 2? Okay, no. Number 3 and number 4 that were brand new from the VP, do you think it's more important than these 2 projects? Well, I don't know enough about them. It's like, well, would you like to go discuss that with the VP? No. Okay, you're number 5. It was, and what's funny about this whole thing, we did that for a couple months and had a manager that came over, just so insightful, so helpful, and said, this is fantastic, Christian. Your team has done a great job. What would be great is if we could get this data all up in SharePoint, which it had been in for the year previously, but we had difficulty getting people over into SharePoint. So yeah, we did this whole initiative, which is kind of funny, where we pulled it out of the whiteboard, put it back in SharePoint, and yet because we had gone through that effort, that's what it took to get people to say, oh, that's what you're doing over in that site, and then go and start to participate. But making that process transparent so people understood. Maybe it was just a training issue, and I know I've spent a lot of time on that, but I'm passionate about the topic if you can't tell. But anyway, so I go into detail about these 5 things in the white paper. Recommend that you go take a look. So great quote here from my CEO, Bradley Heldenays, GT Consult down in, who runs the Durban, South Africa office. What's the biggest problem with SharePoint user experience for customers? It's very simple. How much time does a user need to spend in SharePoint? So, that's a critical point. Are people actually in there using it? And if they're averse to SharePoint, if they can't find their content, if they're not sure where to go for those critical business processes, if they're not sure of the value of the site, then you've failed. You can increase user adoption and productivity if you go and build around those user experiences. It's just as simple as that. So what's the state of the user experience of SharePoint today? So where are things going? So I'm going to talk a bit, this is where things are going, the future state, and it's all SharePoint Online related. And then I'll come back and talk briefly about what to expect in SharePoint 2016, so the on-prem experience. But where the technology is going, and you've probably seen these slides, but at a high level, you've got the Office Graph, which is not a product, it's an underlying technology that's driving most of the cooler features that are happening inside of SharePoint Online. And Office Graph is it's basically going and connecting all the content, the signals from the people, the relationships between people. It understands all the content and metadata that's in SharePoint. It understands who you are. It understands your relationships through those social connections. And then it learns from your interactions with your content. So, for example, it's also looking at content that's in SharePoint Online in OneDrive for Business, as well as conversations that are happening in groups inside Yammer, in Exchange Online, eventually the link conversations as well, and learning from those things. It says, okay, hey, Christian is continually talking about this topic that has to do with this project, and suddenly there's a conversation that happens or a document that's uploaded that has to do with the topic which I've been so engrossed in. It's going to then surface it. It's going to make those connections through the Office Graph. And so how it does that, so the first capability that was developed and launched to surface data that is identified through the Office Graph was Delve. And then Boards is something that extends within Delve. So all Delve is, I know some people think, well, it's just a search result. It's a personalized search result. Well, yeah, it is, sort of. It's a bit more than that, but it allows you, so if you go into your Delve page and there's a bunch of new things on there, like your kind of a personal profile. It's kind of like the new My Site, but it's going to serve up the content which is relevant and personalized to you. That's one way that Microsoft is trying to make the entire experience via the Office Graph more productivity focused, is by personalizing it so that it's relevant. So if you suddenly are talking about project XYZ, it's going to serve up content around XYZ. If you add new people to your team or connect to people socially, that it's going to start surfacing content through those relationships. And Boards, I like to think of Boards as, it is sort of a metadata tag, but it's a way of going in kind of like a Pinterest board. It's very much what that model is like. Or even like a zip file. Like I want to go and create one place where I can go and kind of collect content that I want to have a filtered view across, within my Delve experience. I want to be able to go, and actually I've got an example of this here. So I have this board of Microsoft partner materials. So there might be emails, there might be conversations, there might be anything that is surfaced via Delve, people that I could go and pin and or invite into or add to this board. So if I want to go and cut across, and other people can add to a board as well. If I want to go and look at all of my content, great. If I want to look now at just my reading material, my partner materials, or in this case, the Microsoft partner materials, I could click on that board and it gives me this filtered view and this intelligent view as well of that changes and updates based on what's there. Now you can see other things that within the card that allows me to do. I can see what format these two items. The first one on the left, it's a PDF. It's being served up via my OneDrive. I can email a link. I can invite people to talk about it. I can discuss it within Yammer. I can add it to other boards. And so it's just another way to collaborate. So again, thinking of that user experience, it's making things much more social because that's what people expect. You also have the new groups capability in Office 365. So this is something that if you think of it as kind of the next version of a distribution group in email. So now I can go similar to a board within Delve where I can go and create a group that's based out of Outlook or Exchange Online and create a filtered view into let's say a project team. If I have my project XYZ and I want to invite only 5 people from my organization of 1,000 so that we can see a filtered view of email and talk about those, that we can go in and share files. We have a shared calendar. There's a number of things that are available through a group. And here's a view, simplistic view, but just to give you an idea. So I created a group for Bellevue office for my team here in the US. So conversations, our shared calendar, the various members that we can add to that, a notebook. So there's files that we can share specifically, and there's going to be other services like Yammer that will be added to this over time so that this could be a place where my project team can go and again, you can create a group that is around a customer, so you can instantly have a filtered view into relevant discussions and calendar and conversations with the team serving a specific customer using groups. And if I unclick on that group, if I go out of the Bellevue office and go back to my main view, I mean, I'm not losing all of that data. It's still there. If I'm involved in it, in the email, or the content that's out on SharePoint or OneDrive for Business, I'm still going to be able to access that through my, just going to those core services. But this is that filtered, streamlined view. You also have increasingly this inline social experience that allows you to have conversations across the various services or applications within Office 365. So if you think about probably the one where we heard the most about initially was adding Yammer conversations into Dynamics CRM. So that's one way that inline social is coming. Another one is through the new video portal. So this is one of the new next-gen portal experiences. But adding the Yammer conversations to that, so that what's powerful about this is that you can go in, whether it's a document that's in a group or a number of shared emails in Exchange Online that you want to go in and have a conversation with key people around and put in context to the content. You can go and have those conversations. So it's bringing those conversations to where people are working. So if we're viewing or editing or consuming content together, reviewing a new proposal, that we can have a real-time or asynchronous, so if somebody's offline, have that threaded discussion around that piece of content. So when they come back online, they can see the back and forth with the team and still participate. And that conversation is always associated with that content. So I can go and eventually be added to the team later. I don't have to go digging around to find the social conversation that happened around that document because it's right there attached to that document. Now, of course, another part of the experience is Yammer. So you have that social news feed, that it's a great platform for quick and easy creation of internal and external communities. And it's really about democratizing communication. So much of what we've seen across these things, and this goes back to Eric Overfield's comment about the fact that we have this user experience that's across all of these different options now, and how is it all being tied together? Well, part of it is Microsoft has been talking a lot about, look, they're creating these platforms so that teams have the ability to go in and select what makes sense for my team, for my project, for this conversation, and has various tools and various options. So it's not like going in and saying, okay, hey, there's just only one way for us to have a social interaction. Click on this URL, this tab to get over to this Yammer. No, you can actually go and have that threaded discussion right around that workload, that activity where we're actually in working. So it's tying the social aspect and that user experience directly to the workload. So that's part of what's going on. It's still, things are in motion. Microsoft is still developing a lot of their strategy. Some of the technology, the messaging around the technology has not yet been refined because there's still decisions to be made around some of the core technology aspects. About, there's been a lot of dialogue around, where does conversation live? Should it be in Yammer, or should it be within this other messaging platform that's being accessed via Office 365 groups? And the answer to that is, use the tool that makes sense for your team, for your project, for your needs. And that's why you need to be thinking about the user experience as you start deploying and training your team on how to use these various assets depending on the solutions that you select. Now, the big question for those of you that are not in the cloud, that are not in hybrid, that are not out in Office 365, what about on-prem? Okay, we covered that, right? That was my dramatic pause there. So, yeah, so there's something that you need to go. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that you can go and do, and there are vendors that are, like my company spends a lot of time for our customers. In fact, we have a huge number of customers that do not want to move to the cloud only because they're excited about the new functionality, but their primary reason for staying on-prem today is because they have a highly customized or branded experience, and that is critical to them, and one of the reasons why they went with SharePoint in the first place. So there's so much that you can build. I mean, the vision of SharePoint when it launched was that, hey, it's this out-of-the-box experience is powerful, but it's really a Swiss Army knife. You can build it to be what you need it to be. And you can't yet do everything that you can do on-prem in the cloud. There is not parity from a user experience standpoint. So just understand the trade-offs by being in the cloud, and being in hybrid might be a better option, or if you're fully on-prem, why? So if you're going through and as part of your strategy that branding is critical, then you need to think about at the very least a hybrid strategy, if not an on-prem strategy. So let's talk about this. This is really kind of the meat of things, is that building a plan for a plan. Like where do you actually start and hone your skills around the planning for that user experience? Where do you begin? So you start with that user-centric plan. This is that by determining upfront that that you're going to build a system for your end users. You're not doing this for IT pro and developer glory. So that the actual goal is to focus on improving speed, improving the quality of your end user and customer interactions, whatever those things are, but that you're going to do it by involving your end users. And the second piece is that involving them early and often throughout that process. get them brainstorming up front and get their help in identifying what needs to be done, and make it part of your clearly communicated strategy. Like, here are the places where end users can come in and get involved. Here's a trick that that always seemed to work, but if somebody, one of your end users, let's say you've got your team put together and you've got your testers put together and you've got your power users and all those kinds of things, already identified. Get a couple other end users come and say, you know what, we're really passionate about this. We'd like to be more involved. Don't say no. Figure out how to get them involved, because they're going to become your strongest advocates once you've developed the solution, and inevitably have to cut some of the feature asks. So they're going to be part of that review. They're going to understand why those things are cut, maybe because of time, maybe because of budget, maybe because what was asked for is just not yet possible in the technology, or maybe it's available through third party, but you can't build it, you have to buy it, you don't have the budget yet, those kinds of things. If end users are part of that decision-making process, they'll take that back to their team and deliver that in a way that you cannot as an IT organization. So do not turn away people who want to be part of the process. The next is to map out your key workloads and understand what you're building before you start building it. And I think that the IT pro, and certainly the developer habit is, oh, we can go build a solution for that. Wait, whoa. Is that the right solution? Is that what we need to be building? The other half of this is first you map out, this is what we need to do within the system. Here's what we're trying to automate and extend using SharePoint. And then prioritize those things, because you're not going to be able to do it all. And you want to start with where you're going to get the highest value, where's the greatest need, and start there. One of the things is around, of course, mobility. What does mobility look like in SharePoint? Here's what it isn't. Here's SharePoint on your phone. Look, you turn your phone sideways and it looks like that. That's not what we're talking about mobility. That's one small aspect of it, to say that I can go and I can access it on my phone. When you're going in and looking at this, is a great view. This was created by Protiviti, so another vendor that's out there that this is a just great screen that they've created. But when you're thinking about those business solutions, you've prioritized, like, here are top 3 solutions that we're going to go and build. We're going to pilot out on these initially. We're going to build out on these views, these solutions. Here's what we're specifically trying to develop for. So this is great for how the SharePoint actually appears on the devices. But again, mobility solutions are more than just how you design the screens on the devices that they're being accessed, but thinking about, okay, on that smartphone view, are they trying to access everything that's available in tablet or desktop view, or are they really only trying to do a subset of functionality? So designing for that mobile experience is critical. And we certainly have this if you've never designed for and built solutions for embedded devices. I'm always amazed. Like, I was just at an airport and looked at these cool kind of tough book laptops that the Hertz dealership, the rental company, was using. I was asking the guy what operating system he was using on. I'm too much of the Microsoft in me to ask these kinds of questions when I'm traveling. But it was all Windows based, and they had a very specific designed experience for checking people back in. It was very streamlined and very slick. It wasn't just a log into a screen, the same screen, try to move around the screen, the touch screen, to get to the right buttons in the right places, and it looks the same on your browser back at your desktop. It was designed for that experience. Now, of course, in SharePoint, there's power there. If you look at mobility specifically around those business solutions, it's best to design things that do well, that are designed for those devices. So you want things to be secure, of course, and compliant, but Truly, I mean, iOS, so the Apple devices work differently than Android, which work differently than Windows Phone. You can go and develop a universal app to work across all of those things, but it always works better when it's designed natively for those devices. So something to think about. So you can go with a vendor like Kaligo for because they've been doing that, building these native experiences. So that's something that if it's important to you to have mobilities, to go out and look first at what vendor solutions have been built specifically for that, and do they then meet those workloads, those capabilities that we're trying to build for. Beyond that, the next one is leveraging out of the box first. Always critical. Always start with what is out of the box first. And this is where I think historically SharePoint got in trouble, is because people got in there and said, hey, SharePoint is basically this .NET thing. It's basically a website. I can go and build things for it. And they would very quickly break the SharePoint framework. Now, there were a lot of other problems. It's a simplified version of what reality is. But if you start with understanding, hey, can we do this with out-of-the-box capability? Or do we need to go and build it? Or can we go and buy it? And if sometimes the answer might be, well, we can get 80% of what we need out of the box, but to get 100% of what we have today, we need to build something and it's going to cost this, or we need to buy something and then build and add on to that. And you make the decision 80% is good enough, or hey, we need to go and do this, or hey, it's a showstopper. But leverage what you can first, because then you know it's going to be scalable. You won't have to worry about upgrades in the future. You won't have to worry about, is it going to, am I going to disrupt things with the next build that Office 365 puts in place, or if there's an update to on-prem, is it going to break everything that I built? Then, of course, there's this crazy idea of piloting first, testing, and then iterating on that design. I know, it's crazy insane. Don't just go and build and, hey, we're live, or don't go and build on your production environment. But pilot first is always the best way to go, and it's this whole MVP release, the minimally viable product. Going back many years. So before I went to Pac-Bell, I was with a company called EDS, a consulting company, and I got trained on leading joint application design, or JAD sessions, JAD or RAD, rapid application design. But the concept of that was that we booked a room for 2 days. We had our developers, we had project management there. I was an analyst and technical writer, but was leading the efforts. This is at the beginning of my career, so in the early 90s. And then you had decision makers from each of our internal customer groups, and our client, which at the time was the state of California, and sequestered in this room. So we'd literally sit there and map things out. What are we trying to accomplish? What does this need to look like? And as we were sitting there talking, the developers would actually go in, build a wireframe, and then go in and build a rudimentary version of what we were talking about. Is this what you thought? No, I want these buttons over here. No, that needs to, you click there, it takes you to this subscreen that verifies this. And so we were able to go in and build much more comprehensive requirements and better understand what the expectations were, and get that direct feedback from people that were able to make decisions around that. And we walked out of there with a wireframe or a rough version of that screen or that product or that process. And it was just a very powerful activity. And that's something that we need to get to as we develop within SharePoint, is think about that as you go and pilot it. Look, this is not permanent. This is what we understood. Let's iterate. Let's get your feedback and then fine tune that. And you're going to have the best results as far as user experience, and make sure you get their input and they'll be happier with that end result. You also need to refine your operational improvement models, that change management. I'm using fancy words, just trying to dazzle and amaze you here. But yeah, the change management model, making that transparent and constantly fine tune that. We went in, my last team at Microsoft built out this governance team that was really this change management team for all things SharePoint. And we had a bunch of processes that we put in place to try to keep things as simple as possible. But we were constantly going in there and adjusting and fine-tuning based on feedback from people participating within that board, and then people coming in with new requests and doing what we could to meet their requirements, constantly looking at how can we be more efficient. And honestly, we were looking at how can we spend as little time sitting here talking about change management and focus our time on actually getting stuff done. So the less time we were sitting there doing the bureaucracy thing and pushing paper and building dashboards of status reports and all this kind of crap, and out there actually building things for people, we tried to make it as simple as possible. Of course, it was all in SharePoint, so we had simple forms for new requests coming in, and we made it very quick and as pain-free as possible to get new requests reviewed and prioritized and visible to everyone, so people could add their feedback to other requests that are coming in. And overall, it just was a very efficient way to do change management. And then, of course, finally is around monitoring and measuring. You're never going to know what's worked or what didn't work, what people are actually using, and did you spend your money and time on the right things if you're not monitoring and measuring those things. Of course, in the SharePoint world, metrics are very important. Microsoft is one of the user experiences that they're working on, that admin experience, and some of this through end user experiences, is trying to provide very visual metrics around the usage of Office 365, and you'll be able to get into each individual service and see metrics as well. It's something that you need to think about as well. What degree of metrics and data do you want to provide to your end users so that they're aware of what's going on? Now, where is SharePoint user experience going from here? Again, we had some feedback from some of the experts out there. Going back, Eric Overfield talked about wanting to see a decoupling of the data of SharePoint with the presentation of the data to the end user, so that there's tighter control of the site infrastructure while allowing almost endless front-end customization. And I think we hear that again and again, certainly from the expert community, from the MVP community, and we're waiting for Microsoft to come back and provide kind of a vision of where that's going. Microsoft is spending a lot of time working on out-of-the-box experiences and dynamic experiences as far as the Office Graph and Delve type experiences and through these next-gen portal experiences. But people still want to have that control. They want to go and create their own next-gen portal experiences. And that's where Microsoft, they're talking about where they want to go, but we need to see more out of the roadmap there. Of course, Barry Jenks also came in and talked about, same thing, wants to make it easier to integrate social messaging, file shares, and email into a continuous user experience and have that support for mobile. It's going to be critical that people have the ability to go in and customize and personalize SharePoint. It's what made SharePoint successful on-prem, and we need to have that same capability somehow through the mobile experience. Of course, Microsoft is managing it in Office 365. They're on the back end. They're responsible for maintaining it, making it scalable to all of their customers. But they need to think of a way, come up with a way that allows us to go in and customize that experience. And one of my favorite design people in the SharePoint space, Randy Driscoll with Rackspace, talks about not knowing what's coming up with the next version, but he'd like to see the UI layer for SharePoint rebuilt from the ground up. And he's talking about using some of the existing concepts that are out there that are used, including things like Bootstrap and AngularJS. And he continues. He says it would be good to have a way to customize SharePoint easily without deep interaction with the underpinnings of SharePoint. And he talks about some ways there, but he recognizes that, hey, SharePoint is a huge product. Making all these changes happen is a lot easier said than done, even for the SharePoint product team. But we need to continue providing feedback to Microsoft of what we want to see out of Redmond. And so that's really kind of the end of this, extending the user experience conversation. I really implore you to go and spend some time, if you're not already plugged into the Office 365 technical network, that's where you need to be. It's over on Yammer. You need to be a member of that. Even if you're not using Yammer itself, go sign up, and that's where the community discussion is happening, and provide your feedback to Microsoft. I mean, there's literally somebody on Microsoft 24/7 responding to feedback as it comes in. I'm amazed at the difference in communication. That it's just wide open now. It's fantastic. Over the last 4 or 5 years, it's just been a complete about face. So somewhere else I'd point you to is the Office 365 Customer Success Center. There's a tremendous amount of content, of best practices, methodology, and help there around the broader Office 365 side of things. But of course, there's a lot of end user specific content and guidance there. So definitely want to go take a look, and they're constantly adding to that. And of course, please go download the white paper that's on the Kaligo site. There's the shortened URL. Of course, I always hate that, the number 1 and lowercase l. Anyway, but you can find this in the resources available connected to this session as well. But thank you for watching today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect with you directly. Connect with me via LinkedIn. Always attach a note of who you are and why you'd like to connect to me via LinkedIn. But I'm always happy to do so if just mention that you saw the webinar and wanted to connect, and that's enough for me. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you to Kaligo for hosting the segment. And of course, thank you to the IT Unity team for putting this on today. And have a great rest of your day.